The rain poured relentlessly that night, a cold, unyielding curtain that soaked through Marybeth's thin cotton dress as she stood in the far corner of the creaking old barn, trying to make herself small enough to disappear. At 16, she had learned to recognize the tone in her father's voice, the one he used when he wanted something and didn't care what he had to give up to get it. Tonight, that tone was sharper, laced with bitterness as he spoke to the man standing before him. "She's no good to me," her father sneered, gesturing toward her without even looking in her direction. "All she does is eat and take up space. You want her, you can have her." The man, tall, broad-shouldered, with a beard as untamed as the mountains themselves, did not flinch at the insult. He smelled faintly of pine, wood smoke, and wet leather. His eyes, dark and steady, scanned her as if weighing something deeper than her size. "I'll take her," he said finally, his voice calm and even, yet holding a weight she couldn't understand. Her father's eyes lit up when the man dropped a small leather pouch into his palm. The sound of coins clinking was louder than the rain in Marybeth's ears. Shame burned through her chest, but her face remained stone. Crying would only give her father another reason to sneer. The mountain man stepped closer, his shadow stretching across the straw-strewn floor until it touched her shoes. "Get your things," he said, his tone softer than she expected, though it still felt like a command. "I don't have any," she replied, her voice barely audible. He studied her for a moment longer before jerking his head toward the barn door. A gust of icy wind greeted them as they stepped outside, the rain soaking her hair and plastering it to her face. The man led her to an old, weathered truck parked at the edge of the property, its headlights cutting through the mist. She climbed into the passenger seat without a word, clutching her arms around herself as the engine rumbled to life. The truck pulled away, the tires spitting mud behind them, and Marybeth stared at the silhouette of her father standing in the barn doorway. He didn't wave. He didn't call out. He just turned and vanished into the shadows, as if she had never existed at all. The road wound upward like a serpent, each turn steeper and narrower than the last, the truck's tires crunching over gravel and splashing through shallow streams that cut across the path. Marybeth sat rigid in the passenger seat, her hands tucked under her thighs to hide their trembling, stealing quick glances at the man behind the wheel. He hadn't spoken since they left, except for a single "buckle up" when she first climbed in. The silence pressed on her, but it was not the same heavy, suffocating silence she had known with her father. It felt watchful, almost patient, as though he was waiting for something. Through the fogged window, she saw the land unfolding in layers. Thick forests of pine and spruce, deep ravines where waterfalls tumbled down into unseen pools, and peaks so high they seemed to touch the belly of the clouds. After nearly an hour, the truck pulled into a clearing, and Marybeth's breath caught. Before them stood a cabin unlike anything she had imagined, solid and well-built, its log walls golden in the fading light, smoke curling lazily from a stone chimney. A wide porch wrapped around the front, and from where she sat, she could see it overlooked a valley that stretched for miles, the mountains beyond painted in shades of violet and blue. The man, Elias, she learned when he finally offered his name, unloaded a few supplies from the truck bed before motioning for her to follow. Inside, the cabin was warm, the air scented with cedar, wood smoke, and something yeasty and comforting, like fresh bread. A large stone fireplace dominated the main room, its flames casting a soft glow on shelves lined with jars of preserves and dried herbs. Elias pointed toward a narrow hallway. "Your room's down there," he said simply. The word startled her. She had never had a room of her own, only a corner of her father's cramped house where her belongings were shoved into a battered trunk. The room he'd given her was small but clean, with a bed piled high with quilts and a single window that looked out over the valley. That night, as she lay beneath the heavy blankets, she braced herself for the sound of footsteps, for demands or cruelty she had learned to expect from men. But none came. The only sounds were the crackle of the fire and the wind whispering through the trees, and as sleep claimed her, one thought lingered: this man was nothing like she had been told to fear. Marybeth woke at dawn to a light she wasn't used to, the soft gold of sunrise spilling through her window instead of the dim gray that used to creep through the dirty glass of her old home. Pulling the quilt tighter around her shoulders, she hesitated before swinging her legs over the side of the bed. From outside came a steady, rhythmic thud, like a heartbeat echoing through the crisp morning air. Curiosity pulled her to the porch, where she found Elias, an axe in his hands, splitting logs with effortless precision. He didn't glance at her at first, only spoke between swings. "If you're going to stay here, you'll need to work," he said. "Not because you owe me anything, but because you owe yourself." The words puzzled her. Work had always been a punishment in her father's house, never a choice, never for her own sake. Yet something in Elias's tone made her step closer. He handed her a smaller axe and guided her toward a fresh log. Her first swing was clumsy, the blade barely dented the wood. She expected him to laugh or insult her, but he only said, "Again." The hours that followed were filled with trial and error. Chopping wood, carrying kindling, kneading dough for bread, and helping plant a small patch of winter greens in the garden behind the cabin. Her arms ached, her back throbbed, and sweat beaded on her forehead despite the mountain chill. Still, there was a strange satisfaction in it, a spark she had never felt before. At midday, Elias served them bowls of hearty stew and slices of crusty bread that he told her they'd baked the week before. The food tasted different from anything she'd known, fresh, rich, filling without being heavy. Over the next days, this routine continued. She rose with the sun, worked alongside him, and in the evenings, listened to him tell quiet stories about the mountains, how the land rewarded respect and punished greed, how winter could be both cruel and beautiful. Slowly, her breath came easier, her steps grew steadier, and she began to notice small changes in herself. The girl who had been called lazy and useless was learning she could carry her own weight, sometimes literally. Yet even as she felt herself growing stronger, a question remained, nagging at her like a loose thread in her thoughts. If Elias hadn't taken her for the reasons her father said, then why had he taken her at all? The answer came weeks later, on a day when the mountains seemed close enough to touch the sky. Elias had woken her before dawn, telling her to pack water and bread. They climbed for hours, the air growing thinner and cooler with each step, until they reached a ridge where the world spread out beneath them, a vast ocean of green valleys, silver rivers, and peaks tipped with snow. Marybeth stood there, chest heaving, unsure why he had brought her so far. Elias rested his hands on his knees, catching his breath before speaking. "Your father didn't sell you because you were a burden," he said at last, his voice quiet but steady. "He sold you because he thought you'd never be worth anything. But I knew better. I knew your mother." Marybeth froze, her heart slamming against her ribs. She had so few memories of her mother, just warmth, laughter, and the faint scent of lavender, before she died when Marybeth was small. "Years ago," Elias continued, his gaze fixed on the horizon, "I was lost in these mountains in the middle of winter. Your mother found me, half frozen, and took me in. She nursed me back to life. Before she passed, she made me promise that if you were ever in trouble, I would find you and take you away from him." Tears blurred Marybeth's vision as the pieces began to fit together, the strange way Elias had looked at her in the barn, the fact he had never treated her with cruelty, the patience in his silence. "I didn't buy you," Elias said firmly. "I rescued you. But I couldn't just tell you, you had to see for yourself what you're capable of. I wanted you to know your own strength before you knew the truth." Marybeth turned to look out over the valley, the sun breaking through the clouds and bathing the world in light. She thought of the girl she had been weeks ago, silent, shrinking, convinced she was nothing, and compared her to the girl standing here now, her boots planted firmly on solid rock, her lungs full of crisp mountain air. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like a punishment. She felt like a promise kept, a life reclaimed. And deep in her chest, a seed of something new took root, hope.